Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, members and staff. I'll make it 7 o'clock. That clock's a bit slow, so I think it's time we started. First of all, are there any apologies?
From Councillor Buckley.
Thank you. Next is public participation, and I have one person down to speak, David Shute. Perhaps you'd like to come and stand up here at the microphone, David. Thank you.
Good evening, Councillors, Chair. My name's David Shute. I'm a resident. I've lived in Chandler all my life, 60 years, I'm afraid to say. Councillors will no doubt be aware that there's a disgraceful state of the grass verges in Chandler's Ford. Neat grass verges associated with this desirable area have been turned into wild meadows with no consultation, and then trimmed rather than mowed with a cylinder mower, and this has just left the area looking totally scruffy. The roads and gutters don't get swept, and the grass becomes coarse, and then it will never return to grass verge quality. So we're going to lose the grass verges that we're used to seeing every day. Quite frankly, the Lib Dem councillors, you're allowing this to happen. So unless we get back to cylinder mowing and regular mowing, then we're going to see basically all these verges disappear or just become completely untidy. I don't think this is what people wanted as they moved into the area. It's a desirable area. It's certainly not what people who are used to living here are used to. They're used to neat grass verges. Dog walkers and doctor surgeries are seeing an increase in tick bites, and that's usually related to long grass and debris. So that carries a serious problem and health risk, especially if you get bitten and you get Lyme disease. Can the council tell me, and I'd like to have this response in writing, please, how many grass cuts they're contracted and paid to make by Hampshire County Council? How many cuts have been done since April this year to date? You can have till the end of September. When they will stop the current messy strimming of the grass verges, which none of the debris gets picked up, it just blows into the gutter and then creates weeds in the gutter. We've all seen it. So when they will stop that, and when can we get back to cylinder mowing, which is a much better way to keep the grass looking good, and it also collects the debris. The current method is not suitable really to maintain the look and standards of the area, and will eventually erode the quality of the grass, which I've said previously. But also, it's going to affect the drainage if all the debris continues to go into the gutters and into the drainage system. And that will affect even the cement in the actual, in the curbs as well eventually. So thank you very much. If I could have an answer to that, that would be much appreciated. Thank you.
I'm sure we will give you a written answer. Now, I confess that when I opened my agenda, I turned over 2 pages and forgot the first page. So you just bear with me. I'll say now what I should have said before the meeting officially started. I said good evening and welcome. But we've got to go through some housekeeping before we begin. We're not expecting the fire alarm to sound this evening, but if it does, please leave the building through the fire exits and meet outside at the fire assembly point, and officers will direct any evacuation if it is necessary. Councillors, as you can see, will be using tablet or computer devices because we don't have paper agendas anymore. We only have everything is on is paperless. So you see people using tablets and computers. It's because that's how we look at the agenda now. We always welcome people to speak at the meeting, although this is a formal committee meeting of Eastleigh Borough Council. It is not a public meeting. It is a council meeting held in public. Members of the public that have registered to speak will be invited to speak at the relevant agenda item and will be given a total of 3 minutes each to speak. When the light is amber, light over there, it means you have 30 seconds left remaining.
1 minute. It's set to 1 minute. I'll just
You've turned it to 1 minute, right, thank you. People wishing to speak on an item on the agenda are able to do so before the debate starts. Once the debate has started, it is not possible to invite or receive comments from the floor. We want to be as inclusive as possible, but will not tolerate any disruptions to our meeting. Should there be any disruption, we do have the power under the Council's constitution to remove people from the meeting or continue in private, neither of which we would take lightly or wish to do. Councillors are reminded that to take part in this meeting, you must have an open mind so that you can take all the relevant considerations presented at the meeting into account before reaching your decision. By attending today, you have decided that you will listen to all points of view expressed by the speakers and public and are able to participate and cannot be seen to have predetermined any application. The meeting will be recorded and uploaded to the Council's website. If any members of the public prefer not to be recorded, then do please contact a member of staff. If you are planning on filming and recording the meeting, then do please let us know so that we can ensure that you're not filming members of the public who do not wish to be filmed. The Chair reserves the right to ask any filming considered to be intrusive to be stopped. More information is available on the Council website. Thank you. We've now concluded the public participation. Thank you, David. I'll now ask for declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest, members? No, thank you. We go to the minutes of our previous meeting, pages 5 to 8 of our agenda. Are there any questions on the minutes? If so, can someone please propose that we accept the meeting's assignment? Thank you. Maud, does that find a seconder? All those in favour, please show. Thank you. And I apologise to Councillor Baker. I should have said please indicate.
Oh, no.
I do apologise. Right, thank you members. We now come to Chair's report. This will be brief. And I will start again by welcoming everyone back after our summer break. I hope that everyone, that's members of the public, council staff and councillors, managed to spend time relaxing and enjoying, or perhaps in some cases, enduring the rather hot weather, which we're not used to. I would like to congratulate the staff and pupils at St Swithin Wells Catholic Primary School who received a Gold Award from the Hampshire Ethnic Minority and Traveller Achievement Service, EMTAS, and for their work teaching English to children where it is the child's second language. The pupils at the school act as young interpreters to assist their classmates to integrate and to learn English. They are only one of 9 schools in the whole county that's got this award, and the first in Eastleigh to receive this award. And I think we should, as a committee, send our congratulations to the school for that. I'll just try very briefly to give the public some peace of mind regarding the finances of the Borough Council. We are one of the councils that has done better financially because of our very strong asset management, as a result of which the council were able to make a substantial contribution towards the cost of the new 44 bus service, as also did Chandler Parish Council and Hampshire County Council. This service has experienced some teething problems, and a larger vehicle is now being used, but I would urge more people to make use of the service. I'm afraid it is a case of use it or we'll lose it permanently. I look forward to seeing the new EBC electric refuse vehicle. I know we've got 3 on order, but I think, and I know we've definitely got 1, and I'm looking forward to seeing that in use, because it's obviously better for the environment and for the residents due to lack of any engine noise. It's nice, and the vehicle itself is nice and silent, and I think that'll be a good thing. Right, thank you. We then come to the finance report, and I'll ask our area manager, local area manager, our lab, to please give his report.
Thank you, Chair. Just very short report, so I won't dwell on it too much. Only 2 main items before you for recommendation. There's just the funding of a new dual waste bin in Oakmount Road and a £600 allocation from the revenue reserve for the room hire to cover the winter period of the youth service, which will be based at the Hilt. And I just draw your attention to the appendix, which is where we sort of give a little bit of feedback on previous work, and your community grants, which you allocated back in March 23. That was to the Happy Bunch Over 70s Club, the Knightwood BMX Club, and Chandler's for Scouts. We got a little bit of feedback from Chandler's for Scouts, where they showed us the photos of the tents that they purchased from that grant, and Knightwood BMX Club purchased a laptop, which has improved their race management. So if there's any questions, I'll be glad to take those.
Right, are there any questions, members? James.
Not really a question, Chair, just to say I know the Happy Bunch were very appreciative of their award too. They used the Fryham Community Association facility on a Friday afternoon, and they've been going great guns and really building up post-COVID to good numbers and a very good level of social engagement and people involvement. So thank you for that.
Is there any debate? Do I have a proposer? A seconder?
Yeah.
Thank you. All those in favour, please indicate. Now ask for presentation and planning guidelines.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. A quick presentation on planning guidelines to assist you with the 2 planning items this evening. So proposals must be determined on planning grounds, and they must be determined in line with the development plan unless there are material considerations which indicate otherwise. In this instance, the development plan is the Eastleigh Borough Local Plan 2016 to 36 and the Hampshire Minerals and Waste Plan, which isn't relevant to either of this evening's items. In terms of nature of applications, these are either full applications where all matters are considered, and those are the 2 applications this evening. There's also outline applications where none or only specific matters to be considered were then followed by reserved matters, but I say that's not relevant for this evening. In terms of relevant considerations, there are, as well as the local plan, there's the adopted supplementary planning documents, such as quality places, residential parking standards, trees and various others, as well as relevant government planning policy, in principally the National Planning Policy Framework, which has a presumption in favour of sustainable development. So the Planning Policy Framework is a significant material consideration which takes precedent over the development plan for any development plan policies which don't accord with the NPPF, but in this instance the plan is quite new, not adopted very long, and so is in accordance with the NPPF. The NPPF has key planning requirements, principally to deliver sustainable development and meet housing need and boost supply, promote the growth of the economy, and requires a high standard of design and prevent or mitigate any adverse impacts of development. and includes a presumption in favour of sustainable development, which consists of 3 threads: economic, social and environmental. All are interdependent, and so therefore for development to be considered sustainable as far as the NPPF is concerned, it must meet all 3 of those threads to be considered acceptable. Other material considerations may well be the planning history related to the site or previous applications or decisions, any relevant appeal decisions or site-specific policies, or any site-specific matters, for instance highways, amenity, biodiversity, trees, etc. Any consultee or third-party comments which are relevant in terms of planning, precedent and case law, and the need for 5-year housing land supply. Non-planning related issues are any moral, racial or religious views, any issues of devaluation or otherwise of property, loss of any private views or breach of covenants, or matters covered by other legislation such as building regulations, alcohol licensing, environmental permits, etc. Any personal views about an applicant or their reasons for an application, or any civil matters such as boundary disputes or rights of access. So in terms of decision making, the committee may choose to make a decision contrary to the recommendation of officers, and if that is the case, then we would ask that the committee gives clear reasons why something should be approved or refused. There is the option to defer an application to a later committee should you require further clarification on any points or additional information. And there's also the option to amend or add additional conditions as part of any application should you be minded to. What we'd have to, as the local planning authority, you're required to consider whether development could be, an unacceptable development could be made acceptable through the application of a condition rather than straight refusal if necessary. And any conditions that are applied must meet the 6 tests. They must be necessary, relevant to planning and relevant to the application or the development proposed, must be enforceable, precise and reasonable in all other aspects. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. We now come to item 8 on our agenda, planning application, land adjacent to 52 The Crossways. I'll ask planning officer to make a report, and then I'll come to members of the public who wish to speak after that. We do it this way because then at least you'll have, if you listen to the report, you'll have the latest information so that you can speak from a point of knowledge. Right, can we have the presentation, please?
Good evening. This is agenda item 8 for land adjacent to 52 The Crossways. It's for the construction of 1 4-bedroom dwelling. Just as a quick update to the report that was published, we've added the additional informative to the decision notice if it was to go out with the permission. So that would say, note to applicant, the applicant is advised the granting of permission for the development does not imply right of access to the Crossways, which is a private road. The applicant is advised to seek and obtain permission for the use of the private road in the Crossways from the owners of the road before commencing the development. So now I'll go on to show you the proposal. So this is the location plan with the site outlined in red, and you can see their access from the Crossways with Keble Road to the north. This is the site plans showing the dwelling as it would sit in the plot. So I've just put on a few arrows there just to see, so that's the proposed dwelling with 2 car parking spaces on the driveway and another one which is proposed as an integral carport. So you can't see that on the site plan, but it's there. And then there's the rear garden space, which is approximately 79% of the internal floor space. So that would be in accordance with our standards, which we recommend 60%. And then to the bottom right of that plan, you can see there's a daylight test available for the dwelling at number 16 Keble Road, showing that 25-degree line, and that there's adequate daylight available for that dwelling. So moving on to the proposed elevations, you can see again I've just put on a few arrows to help point a few key points out. So there's a proposed double bay which is seen within the locality of the Crossways and Keble Road. There's an amendment to the roof form which originally came in as a gable, and we've reduced that down to a hip just to reduce any potential dominance that might have had. There's a cat slide roof again shown within the locality of the Crossways, and also just for clarity there's an element of roof glazing which I know it looks a little bit like a balcony, but it is just roof glazing to the ground floor element of the property, where you can see on those elevations there's a larger ground floor area than there is first floor, so that slanted section is where that glazing is proposed. And again here on the floor plans you can see that a bit clearer where that glazing is. But these are just the floor plans again showing 4 bedrooms, and then you can see that carport there as well on that ground floor plan to the left of the drawing. So these are just some key views from site. So A, as I've labelled it, shows the view from the entrance of the Crossways. B, showing the site when coming down the Crossways looking west. C is the view of the site itself from the Crossways. And then D is again the site looking east. Then some more views within the plot. E shows the site looking south towards the Crossways. F is the neighbour, number 52, the Crossways. G is looking down the existing garden of 22 Keble Road. H looking at the neighbour to the other side, which is 16 Keble Road. And then I just shows the dwelling with a double bay hipped roof within Keble Road, just as you approach the Crossways, so just to show how that's a similar characteristic within the locality. So just some key considerations from this proposal is that the proposed dwelling would be in keeping to the surrounding estate and is comparable in size and design. A condition requiring confirmation of materials is required prior to construction above damp-proof course. There's adequate parking provision on site for the proposed dwelling in accordance with our residential parking standards SPD. In addition, the site is well served by public transport with routes to Winchester, Millersdale, Southampton City Centre and Eastleigh. The residential amenity proposed by the dwelling is suitable for the future residents and the existing neighbouring dwellings, both at 16 Keble Road, 22 Keble Road and 52 the Crossways. There's a possibility of a right of access, but this is ultimately a civil matter. Worthy of note here is that while the principle of development and access on site is considered acceptable, the granting of permission does not give the applicant any right of access to the Crossways, which is the private road. Permission to access and use the private road from the relevant landowners should be sought before commencing the development. And a submitted drainage technical note is acceptable, but we have asked for further detail of surface and felt drainage via condition. And so the recommendation would be subject to the conditions within the report and securing upfront payments. We would recommend permission, but this would be delegated back to the chair, vice chair and Service Director of Planning and Environment, subject to that payment being received. Thank you.
Thank you. We come now to members of the public who've registered to speak. When I ask you to come, would you come up to the microphone, please, and state your name and home address, so that, just for the records, members know where you live. Some of you here, I know where you live, but others, other members need to know. So if you could give your name and address, that would help. Each member of the public will be given 3 minutes each. Obviously, we've got 8 members of the public wishing to speak on the 2 applications tonight, so we do have to be a little bit more rigid on time. And in theory, I could say that you have to share 5 minutes between you, but that would not be. I'm aware that both applications are a little bit contentious and making strong feelings. So if we allow 3 minutes each, but I would ask you, as far as possible, please don't keep repeating the same points. Just say that you agree with what so-and-so said, so that we can bring any new points, because we do need to know your opinions. And the first one I have down to speak is John Dave. John, if you'll come forward, please, to the microphone.
Am I on?
Can I just get 2 seconds? Sorry, can you just give us 2 seconds to catch up with you? I'm really sorry. We're just having a quick conversation.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'll post it.
Yeah, so if I can just give that back to you, if that's okay.
I was doing it out of courtesy, really.
Yeah. Thank you.
Sorry about that, but
No problem.
when I'm given legal advice, I must take it.
Thank you. Well, good evening, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. Excuse my back. A lot of people tell me it's better than the front, but anyway. First of all, a lot of the residents, I'm from the Crossways development, and I've been asked to sort of send apologies from some of the residents who've not been able to make the meeting. And I would ask, actually, one point, if for the minutes they could register the fact that I have asked that this statement is preempted by my comment that I say this without prejudice. We, that is myself and others, have spent hours and hours trawling through the procedures, documents obtained from the council's website, even establishing what you can or you can't say when addressing the meeting. I'm aware of the time constraints because I was given misinformation. They said 5 minutes, I believe it's 3. We're not planning officers knowing all the procedures and various wrinkles in Eastleigh planning, unlike former Eastleigh planning officer Louise Cutts, now representing the applicant, Mr. Reddings, and being a director of Wessex Planning Limited. When acting as the applicant's agent and sending in an accompanying letter to the plans to the council, this lady declared access and parking required was not a problem. This statement is misleading and we strongly refute it. The Crossways, as has been pointed out, is a private road assigned totally to existing residents as part of their property. Moreover, the estate has restricted parking and, restricted covenants, stating there is no parking on the road itself. It's a very narrow road and there is a single small pavement and footpath. Vehicles must be parked on own driveway, excluding any commercial vehicles of any sort, sign written, etc. Therefore, this statement is somewhat misleading, and there are other examples of his misleading statements contained within signed detailed planning documents. I would be pleased to elaborate, however, I am aware of the time constraints. There have been precedents set regarding access to and fro across our private road for the building of property. Besides lawyers' opinion and the views of a highly respected and hugely experienced developer, they have confirmed that a deed of easement will be required. That's from the residents of each part of their road. So we're talking about over 30 to be granted. If they are confirmed that a deed of easement will be required if the proposed dwelling is to be achieved at all. I mention this because of Council's remarks in the public pack report sent to this meeting as follows. And the report is headed Chandler's Ford and Hiltingbury Local Committee, item 8, page 14, appendix 43, which you may not have read, some of the people. It is noted that many residents are concerned by the potential access onto the private road, Crossways. In terms of planning, there is a reasonable likelihood of access rights to the public highway, which is Creeble Road. As such, does not form a reason for this dwelling could not be delivered. That's arguable. However, any legal requirements for rights of access will need to be agreed outside of the planning process. I accept that, but they won't get it. It only takes one individual of the estate to say, no, I'm not giving it. These remarks are considered both misleading and biased in the extreme. It is a matter of fact and record that only a handful of residents, approximately 5, have been informed by the council of any proposed development. To make a judgment on lines expressed in the report is both questionable and totally inaccurate, and somewhat misleading for the councillors at this meeting. Or are we to surmise the planning department is inferring, after consultation possibly with their lawyers, the possibility regarding proposed development, there exists documents or an agenda we have not been made privy to. In addition, applicant, together with resident of 52 Crossways, who has a financial interest in this development, and 40,000 has been mentioned, there have been a catalogue of various misinformation on what can be constituted as bullying towards residents. And I do have written evidence of this.
If you could sort of wind up, John, you've had nearer to 5 minutes, and it would help because we've, in theory, I've got to allow the applicant, if I give you 20 minutes, I've got to give the applicant 20 minutes.
I appreciate it, but I did time this when I read it.
You could wind up.
Well, you gather the information. Basically, what I'm saying is the likelihood of access is not going to be granted with a deed of easement. And I would just read you the last comments on the last page because I think it needs to be thought about. Personally, I've never conceded to bullying in any form and do not intend to start now. Fortunately, I'm in a position to address any issues that may be forthcoming in that regard. And I think, Mr. Chairman, you may know that, particularly to those less fortunate than myself. In closing, I would leave this thought with you. Most litigation is decided on previous judgments. The mighty Donald Trump, President of the USA at the time, thought with his enormous legal team and billions could ride roughshod over and not obtaining a deed of easement from a small farmer in Scotland. The farmer didn't want to grant access for this proposed golf course, and with all his power, Trump failed to achieve it. Apparently, it remains so today, demonstrated that no matter whom you are, nobody is above the law in our green and pleasant land. I also believe somebody else called Boris has just found this out to his cost. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I have Sean Corwood, please.
Good evening, members. I'm Sean Kaywood, and I live at 24 The Crossways, so be opposite the proposed dwelling. Firstly, based on the proposed dwelling itself and the reports, there are certain aspects of it that I don't agree with, and I believe limited information was given to sway a response that would be positive towards it. Primarily, there was no existing look was mentioned within the report of the existing properties on the development, which for anyone who's seen it is obviously incorrect. All the properties have similar materials and styles, and the original plan was very different to those, under the terms of saying there wasn't a need for consideration as there wasn't an existing look. This has been changed, but the material still would make this proposed dwelling very different. There is talk about it not being squashed or restricted on the site, of being using all the space and being tight in the proposed plot. But again, the list of measurements for existing properties is minimal, primarily from the smaller dwellings on the existing rather than the majority of them, which would show that it would appear still closer together to existing dwellings than the existing houses on the Crossways. And then, from my point of view, there is a lot of mention of the two properties that make up the site existing where it is going to be turned into this dwelling, of that overlooking those properties, but there is no mention of any of the properties otherwise directly opposite, and how the impact of those windows would directly impact livable spaces. And the way it's currently dealt with on the Crossways is through covenant. I know that can't be covered, but because of the tight nature of the road, there's covenants there to ensure that there's no overlooking into livable spaces, and requires window coverings, which again seems to not been covered onto the front view of the proposed plan. Going forward, separate to this, the deed of easement required to access the site, the reports state that they can easily obtain drainage onto existing public sewers. Though there is a legal right to that, there's been no mention, or as I'm aware, any details of anyone trying to obtain the permission to cross their land onto other people's private land where the sewers exist. To be able to get the permission is required by Southern Water to be able to allow the connection, and none of that is so far that I've seen been obtained, especially when the plans seem to suggest onto property I own, including my driveway and the road directly outside, which is part of our property. Then there's the road itself. More than just the existing access, it's very narrow where it is, and it's on a turn where it narrows. I already have issues leaving my driveway to access the highway, and there's been multiple times when there's been near misses because of the way that layout is, and it's what wasn't designed for that. During the construction, this is going to have issues. None of that's been dealt with, and also the access onto the road and how that's going to be mitigated has not been covered. So, given the time and most of the other points already been mentioned, thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Right, now I have Amanda Gomersall wanting to speak, please. You have to excuse me if I get names wrong. So
It's all right.
I'm a northern lad, really.
Well, it's a northern village, Alan, just outside Barnsley. You know, think of Andy Gomersall, the rugby player. Good evening, Chair, Councillors, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Amanda Gomersall, and I'm at number 20, The Crossways. Again, my statement is without prejudice, and I fully endorse Mr. Day's comments. From my research, there are very few things I can talk about, so I'm going to keep it brief. My first point is that the planning notice letters were only sent to a few houses, though we all own a section of the road known as the Crossways. My question to the committee: should not every house who owns the road be notified? And under section 11, page 7, quote, given the constraints of the Crossways, a construction site management plan would be required as a condition. Please confirm that every house would be involved in this process. Point 2, road safety. It has been mentioned the road is very narrow. In fact, outside my house it's 4.7 metres. And if the average car is now 1.98 metres wide, we need to do our maths here, and you have a reasonable clearance of 40 centimetres either side, 2 cars can't actually pass without mounting the curb. There are no designated visitors parking spaces within the Crossways. So this is more than dangerous when visiting cars are parked on the pavement. This is extremely important for our residents and all pedestrians. So further traffic, visitors parking would be an issue for this development and others in the future. We are a road of mixed residents and from all ages. We have several young families with children who like to ride their bicycles to and from school. The road should be a safe environment for everyone to walk, and I'm thinking of my old age and my wheelchair, for me and my wheelchair too. I just want to bring 2 last points. The Southern Water has said in this report, no objection, point 12, page 7, and points 44 to 47, page 14. I question this, as currently the road has flood and surface water problems at the lower end of the Crossways, and the houses in Chelvington Road beyond the footpath have damp issues. This is currently being investigated, I understand, by the Council and Southern Water, and should be acknowledged as a current issue. Lastly, should the planning process, this is a question, should the planning process be fully transparent and ethical? I ask, as a public serving department, is it ethical that a planning advisor for a submission is a former member of Eastleigh Planning Department? Certainly in my field, I have to be completely impartial and have no previous relationships in any situation that I'm involved in. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. And I'll probably pronounce this wrong. Wendy, is it Doherty or? Ah, right. Please.
I'm Wendy Doherty. I live in Otterbourne, but I'm here representing my son, who owns a house which is called 75A Bournemouth Road, which is adjacent to the plot on 16 Keble. I recognise some of the councillors' names here, and you will be aware that I've spoken previously about the planning permissions requested for 16 Keble Road. My concern is access, and also what Amanda was saying, because as the councillors know, there's a great deal of concern about surface water drainage and sewage, and also land stability, to be honest with you. The land stability reports are not perfect in that area. The main concern from my son's point of view is the surface drainage, which coming from Keble Road, there's quite a lot of water that comes off Keble Road past his property. Also, his property is on a sewage pump because his property is below the sewer on Bournemouth Road, and I'm wondering what's going to happen with this property as well, because I don't know the elevations of it, but it looks to me like it's not too much higher than the plot at 16 Keble Road. 16 Keble Road, as some of the councillors may remember, One of the ladies who's lived adjacent to this for many years remembers the gentleman who used to live in 16 Keble Road, trying to dig a hole in his garden and finding that he had a geyser coming up rather than anything else. He had to concrete it in to stop water actually coming up out of the property. So the surface drainage is an issue in that area, and I can't see any reason this land being adjacent to the land at 16 Keble Road, why it shouldn't have the similar issues and similar concerns. My concern also is that should this be permitted, what happens to access to the 16 Keble Road site? I think a lot of people might be worried, looking at it from the aerial point of view, that this may afford access to the Keble Road site, which is the main issue from the point of view of the planning on the Keble Road site, from the point of view of planners, the local planners. So that's a real concern from our point of view. So basically, to summarise, surface drainage, sewage, land stability, access. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I have Geoffrey Vass down to speak, but I don't think he's here, is he?
Jeff's not here.
So then it goes to Matt Whale then, please.
Evening everyone, I'm Matt Whale, I live at 25 The Crossways. I want to elaborate on something that Amanda said and actually question if it's a valid planning application. It's my understanding that it's Eastleigh Borough Council's policy to notify everyone with an interest or adjoining property to the development. There's 42 properties on the Crossways, and due to the convoluted ownership of the road and communal areas, there's a communal area right next to this development, and yet only half a dozen properties have been notified. And I've spoken to over half the property owners in the Crossways, and they all object to this development. So I think, that they need to be notified. That's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I'll ask our planners, do you wish to reply at this point to members of the public?
Yes, I'll pick up on some of those points. Thank you. So firstly, just again to clarify the access private road comments, just to reiterate that is outside of the planning process, and that this planning permission in itself doesn't give rights of access, and that should be discussed and further taken forward outside the planning process with relevant landowners. Points on notification of neighbours within the Crossways. Standard procedure for planning application was followed, and that we wouldn't alter that for a private road, and that was just to cover adjoining neighbours to the land which was completed. Generally, overlooking to the property opposite wouldn't be considered any different to what's currently seen on the Crossways as existing. There are current relationships that are just as similar, and that plot sizes again are comparable. The fact that it's a narrow road ultimately is the existing case. This doesn't make the road any narrower. And that we have got a further condition on surface water and sewage disposal under condition, although some information on that has been provided up front, and Southern Water were content that they had capacity for surface water within their sewer system.
Thank you. And can I just come back on another point about the applicant's agent, Mrs. Cutts, having previously worked for Eastleigh. Yes, that's the case. Quite a number of years ago now, Louise. There are rules in place for ex-employees that they can't be involved in any submissions, planning application submissions, but it's only for a period of 6 months or so after leaving the authority. Louise has worked for Eastleigh for seven years. Blimey, is it that long? Right, okay, 7 years. So, and she's a regular agent, submits many applications to the borough, and so there is no issue in that respect with regards to Louise being able to represent the applicant. Ultimately, she's entitled to submit an application just as anybody is, and we as the planning authority will deal with it purely on planning grounds.
Right, thank you. Go to members for. We'll start with questions, please. Sorry. Oh, of course I've got to go, Louise. Yes, yes. Thank you, Guy. I have never been so stressed about a meeting in my life.
Right, okay, for those of you who didn't know, I am Louise Cutts, planning agent for the proposal. My speech isn't too long, it's just a few points. I think it's important, first of all, to emphasise that this site lies within the urban area where the development of new dwellings is acceptable in principle. Indeed, this site appears as a plot left over from the development of the Crossways, which was itself a comprehensive development of back gardens of Keble Road and Shaftesbury Avenue. The proposal has been designed to be in keeping with the existing dwellings within the Crossways and includes bay windows and a hipped roof, as described. The plot size and distances between existing and proposed dwellings are also in keeping with those found within the Crossways, and there would therefore be no harm to amenity. The parking is also provided to the required standards, and the access to the Crossways is safe. Much has been made about the private nature of the Crossways, but members will be familiar with many other proposals accessing private roads, and understand that private rights of access are dealt with as described by the case officer outside the planning system. My client has noted that your tree officer, your ecological officer, Hampshire Highways and Southern Water all have no objection to the scheme, subject to several planning conditions, all of which have been agreed with my client and are included within your recommendation. Overall, it's considered that this modest proposal will make a good addition to the street, in line with both local and national policy which encourages increased densities in urban areas. And as such, it's hoped that members can support their professional officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, and apologies once again. Now I will go to members' questions, please. Pragnell.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, for those who can't see, Councillor Pragnell. I wonder, could the officer please just read out the surface water drainage condition that you are suggesting, please?
Yeah, that's no problem. So it's condition number 4. And it just reads, prior to commencement of development, details of the proposed means of foul sewerage and surface water disposal shall be submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority in consultation with Southern Water. This shall be in broad accordance with the submitted drainage technical note V11, and that's reason to ensure satisfactory provision of foul and surface water drainage.
Thank you.
Are there any more questions, members? In that case, then we'll go to debate. Is there any debate, please?
Thank you. You knew I would. I've listened to both sides here, and I have a lot of sympathy with the landowners of Crossways. I do agree it's impertinent to planning permission onto your property and access across, but it is dealt with outside of planning. My biggest concern, I think, is an increase in storm surge caused by the new property. We already know we have 2 properties in Chalvington Road that suffer horrendous flooding to their gardens. And I'm not talking about half an inch. I'm talking about 8 inches of water on their front lawn gardens. They have to move their cars off the drive. The thought that we would add any more to it is abhorrent. There's absolutely no way that you're going to get me to agree to that. Those poor people didn't ask and didn't get any benefit from the crossways being built, but they sure benefit from the stormwater. And that is something that I'm absolutely shocked by Southern Water not mentioning. I will be taking that up with them, because they've been involved with me and the Environment Agency to try and figure out how we solve this problem, and to say that they don't have an objection is ludicrous. I also wonder about the road, the private road durability. It's not a what you call an A road, and talking about construction traffic going up and down it, I do wonder whether that road is suitable for that, and that's something for the road owners to consider. But for me, I think I would need to see how this site would have its own stormwater attenuation for me to consider this to be an acceptable solution. I think it's an ill-thought problem, only because they just don't have, 1, the right of access, and 2, they don't have a connection to a drain which is going to be suitable to handle their stormwater. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Any other members?
Right, I'd like to say thank you for talking about your concerns. I think it's very important that you did mention them. And I have to say, Mr. Day mentioned that basically easement is required. So though that's not in the planning process, that may be something to be aware of. It may not even start if they don't agree an easement, and it probably couldn't be constructed. The thing about the environment that Councillor Pragnell has mentioned, I agree with. I'm aware that there is a major problem suffered by Chalvington Road residents caused by flooding from crossways and from other sources, which hasn't been addressed. And this does give me some concern. Adding another house to that estate, I cannot see how it could, well, do anything but exacerbate it. I think that's really all I can say at this point.
Jane?
Yeah, we're still in discussion phase, aren't we? We haven't had I wonder if on that last point that both councillors have raised, there's any ability to get to what the quantum is. I mean, the site exists, the water drains away from the site. The fact that it's going to have a roof and walls, well, the walls don't make any difference, it's the roof and that surface area. And quite often with developments, there's some local soak-away facility on the site to cope with the bulk of that water. So we're talking about the incremental water, which is what we understand from one of our speakers. They would have to get an easement, a permission, to build a drain into the surface drain system. Have I understood those facts correctly, please?
Yes, essentially, if the water can't be dealt with on site, which, knowing that area there, lots of clay, springs, natural percolation, natural soakaways are probably not a viable option because of the groundwater levels. So the only real way is to ensure that it doesn't dispel off the site onto neighbouring sites is to link to the existing drainage network. But again, that's a civil matter with the appropriate landowners and Southern Water and so on to gain those additional consents that will be required.
If I may continue, Chair, the question of sewerage doesn't come into that because that's the closed system. The black and grey water goes through a system which is enclosed, separate, and doesn't arise as part of this discussion.
I would imagine that's the case, yeah. The age of the crossways, I would imagine there are 2 separate systems, a foul and a surface water.
Yeah. I think we've got to be pretty confident on that. It would have been helpful if we'd had a more comprehensive statement from Southern Water. Very helpfully, Dave Pragnell's asked that the exact wording be read out, and that does indicate a problem, but not really a solution to the problem, doesn't it? There was that, and then my other question, Chair, was in relation to this closed community, which the residents thought was completed as built out, and that this space of land was going to remain unbuilt on, is what I'd understood from them. But then what I understood from the representative of the applicant is that actually this site was always had in mind to be built upon. Now, in my mind, there's quite a difference between those two statements, and the historical information is, I can hear from the folk in the room, that as people moved into this estate, or this rather delightful private road, they were under the impression it was built out. Now, I know that's not a planning issue, but that's where a lot of the feeling that this shouldn't be permitted. I think it is adequately covered by the statement that we've had, which will be included undoubtedly in the minutes of this meeting, which is that the easement and improvement of the residents is legally required, as we understand, or they are recommended to investigate whether it's legally required for them to be able to have the easement, to have the access, not just to the front of the curtilage, but of the access indeed to the whole road, which this house would be part of that community. I think, Gary, you're nodding to say that is the case.
Yes, if members are minded to approve, as per the recommendation this evening, that doesn't automatically mean that the dwelling can be built. There are other requirements to meet, not just gaining right of access with the adjoining landowners and everybody else that are relevant along their crossways up to Keble Road, as well as connection to the drainage, but also consent from Southern Water, building regulation approvals, various other consents. So this is one step into the final scheme. So simply, if you do decide to approve tonight, it doesn't mean automatically it will go ahead. There are other hurdles to overcome for the applicant.
I will just ask a legal question that Crossways was actually originally built as a gated development. So if the gates were brought back into use and the developer was then to try and enforce those gates, that would be criminal damage, would it not? And I'll just pass a couple of comments, really, that the applicant is seeking access to a private road. The owners of that road have to pay for maintenance. They also have to pay for the street lighting and the energy of the street lighting, because it was all private. And I think it is only reasonable that if anyone wants to build there, they should pay towards that, because there were extra houses added into Crossways after the original development, but they were put in by the original developer, and such arrangements were made for those houses. They had to get the deed of easement and pay the same as everyone else does, or pay their share. And I think that when this has been done, I would ask that the agent bears this in mind, because I think it's just natural justice to me that that should be the case, although it can probably, it would be up to the residents themselves, unfortunately, to force it. But I think natural justice would also require not only the easement, but payment towards the cost. Anyway, I said too much, I usually do. I think James wants to speak again.
Well, just one further clarification query. This question of consultation, which is quite important, and the 4 or 5 immediate neighbours were consulted, and the residents who are here this evening take the view that because of the nature of it being a private street, everybody should have been consulted. And I think the answer is that there is precedent within Eastleigh Borough Council of similar situations where not all the residents have been consulted. But is that consistent with the rules, and are there rules and guidance beyond some precedent of some other, perhaps very different in its nature, situation? I think Gary entirely understands my question.
Yes, there are regulations in terms of notifications of members of the public who should be notified of a planning application, etc. In terms of that, it's any immediate neighbours adjacent to the site that has been identified by the red line on the allocation plan. So in terms of notifications, all immediately adjacent neighbours were contacted. They were written to directly to inform them of the planning application. So in terms of the regulations and Eastleigh Borough Council's policies which follow that, we have done our statutory duty in terms of notification. There wasn't a need in legal terms, in terms of legislation, to notify everybody in the crossways. Because yes, it's a private road, but equally you could put the same argument to Keble Road. If it was on to Keble Road, would we have to notify everybody in Keble Road of proposal put forward? And then do we do it for people in Shaftesbury, or do we do it for people in Chandler? It's how far do you leave it? So we've done what we statutorily are obliged to do, and so that does stand as far as we're concerned.
Right. Are there any more questions, or is there any debate?
I think, just to sum up, I want to echo that, as a lot of people have already said, I have a huge amount of sympathy for everybody who's spoken today. I think we all share a lot of these concerns. I think the truth is that a lot of them will probably be addressed in a different forum further down the road. And I think that we are limited in what we can do. So, thank you very much.
Thank you. If there is any more debate, would someone like to move something, please? Councillor Duguid. James?
Chair, in order to enable this to come to a conclusion, somebody has to move it, and therefore I am moving it so that we can bring matters to a conclusion one way or another.
Are you moving to permit as in per the recommendation?
I'm moving the proposal, yes.
Does that find a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Baker. George? Right. I have a proposer. I have a seconder. I've got to ask, is there any further debate? Councillor?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I appreciate that the agenda is to permit. I would like to submit a motion that we vary that and we refuse.
That wouldn't be legal because it just negates the original one, so you achieve that by voting against it. So that wouldn't be... I can't accept that. An amendment must amend, it can't turn it over. Right. In that case, I have proposer, have a seconder. I agree, this is a very difficult one. I really... as I said, it is, in planning terms, we have to remember we've got to go by planning. And I do know of cases where people have applied to build in someone else's back garden without any access or anything, and it's been passed. They never got it because the landowner never sold the land. But these things, planning, we have to take a legal decision. So I go to the vote. All those in favour.
So am I allowed as the proposer to sum up?
Yes. Sorry. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I'm very sympathetic to what the residents have said, and I do think there are some genuine issues. I think we've got the wording sufficient with these genuine issues to ensure, with the chair and vice chair being involved in the process, that they are scrutinised very thoroughly and I think that's absolutely a precondition of me considering proposing and supporting this motion. I anguish about it because I've got to say my heart says I think we should turn this down, but the logic of it says to me we've got one brick in the building of this property by giving planning approval. There are another 10 bricks that are not likely to materialise, partly for the reasons that you've just said, Chair, in that it does seem to require easements and approvals of all the residents, which is surely not going to be forthcoming. But I think for us to reject it when the officers are saying we have no valid grounds for rejecting it, and my questioning to officers was to see if we could find something we could hang a hat on and legitimately say we should reject this. And so much as I dislike it, I feel obliged to propose it and I feel obliged to support it, but with a very heavy heart.
All right. All those in favour, please show.
Aye.
Those against? Thank you. The decision. Sorry? Yeah, I know, I put it off while I was rustling the papers to get to the next item. Right, now we come to planning application, item number 9, land adjacent to 20 Steel Close. I'll ask... we can wait while people leave. Thank you very much for attending and for giving us your comments. Right, now we come to land adjacent to 20 Steel Close. Would our officers please present the report?
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. This application is the construction of a 2-bedroom detached dwelling. The application site comprises an open piece of land situated to the northeast corner of Steel Close. This is bound by vegetation to the east, screening Oakmount Road. Oakmount Road is slightly on higher ground than the application site. As set out within the committee report, paragraphs 5 to 7, the layout of the proposed dwelling has been amended during the application process. This shows the building line to follow the same established building line with the existing cluster of terrace properties to the north of Steel Close. The proposed elevations would seek design cues from the surrounding street scene with a variance of materials at ground and first floor level. These are recommended to be secured as set out within condition 7 of the committee report. The site photos show the application site when stood within Steel Close looking to the northeast corner. These site photos on the left shows me stood in the back of the rear amenity area looking down onto Steel Close, and then the one on the right shows the residential amenity area for the proposed dwelling. The key considerations are set out above. Ultimately, the proposals are considered to be in line with all relevant local plan policies. As such, the application is recommended for approval. It would be requested that it be delegated back to the Service Director for Planning in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair to ensure that the necessary monetary mitigations are secured prior to any decision being issued. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, ask members of the public who've registered to speak to come forward. Again, 3 minutes. And would you give your name and your address, please, just for all members of the public? 'Cause both of our speakers, I know exactly where they live. So, Derek Norgan, if you would come forward first, please.
Yes, thank you. Good evening. Firstly, I would like to say that the residents really wish to know how much longer this is going on. I believe the first application went in December 1918, 17, 18. How many applications have we had regarding this property? Is it 4 or 5? I'm beginning to lose track now. It's been altered, tinkered about. To be quite honest, looking at the screen there, where is the aerial photo? Is the aerial photo not available? The site plan, it bears no resemblance whatsoever to that site in question. On the planning application, there is an aerial photo. Where is it? It shows that whole area, that whole development is going to be completely shaded. The northern boundary are all protected trees. The eastern boundary, it just shows 1, 2, 3, 4 trees. Anyone who knows Oakmount Road knows that is completely covered in. That property is going to be permanently in the shade. If not now, if not then, at some point in the future, there's going to be future applications to literally take that out. I don't even see how any building work can even commence with that as it is at the moment. You know, we appreciate that houses have got to be built. We all completely accept that, but you're going to have to basically take all of that out. Every tree in there is going to require cutting back to such an extent. There'll be nothing left of that. It's not only that, parking is an ongoing issue in Chandler's Ford. Parking in Steel Close is an absolute nightmare. Do we really need any more traffic? The main cause of this is enterprise vehicle hire. It's customers and its staff park where they feel. Sometimes in the residential part of the close, and including the reversing area there, for days on end. We really do not need any more vehicles in the close. And noticing the diagram there, why does the driveway cut right across the property of number 20? If number 20 wasn't owned by the developer, who would allow that? If it was my property, they wouldn't be allowed it. I would like to say more, but I see the red lights on, so thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Julian Gray, please.
Good evening. My name's Julian Gray, and I live at 17 Steel Close. Derek has just begun to say a little bit about the way the residents feel about this, and I cannot express to you the frustration with this. We've had plans for 2 detached houses, 1 detached house, a detached bungalow, now this one. It's absolute rubbish. Anyway, I'll get on to what I was going to say. There are 2 distinct parties who are diametrically opposed in this argument. There's the residents of Steel Close who are interested in the amenities and our nice little close that we live in. And there's Murphy Prime Developments, who have only one interest in life, and that's making money. So we'll get that out of the way before we start. Mr. Murphy does not reside in Steel Close. This is not a development by the person at number 20. This is a completely separate thing. The people who live at number 20 are actually tenants of Mr. Murphy's. So I'm assuming that you've had no objection whatsoever from number 20 to this, for obvious reasons. All the previous objections still apply. Parking and traffic in the close is a nightmare, as Derek has said. With the current drive to force everybody by the government to use electrified vehicles, it's becoming increasingly important that you can park in front of your own house. This would be impossible. I know not simply for us in the close, but the people living in Central Eastleigh, as you all appreciate. You can't get near your houses, so it's not going to be a goer at all. This will force residents to use public charging facilities, if there are any, with increased costs in that, as opposed to using your own electricity supply. Air quality within the close is dreadful. Yeah? It's not open to debate. There's an air monitoring station in the close for that reason. The air quality is dreadful from the motorway. In his applications, in previous applications, and in this one, I believe, Mr. Murphy's proposed to include a forced ventilation system into his build. That's totally ludicrous. Taking air from one side of a building will not affect the quality of the air from the opposite side of the building. And in order to make that work, surely you'd have to have all the windows closed all the time. So I'll say no more on that. What I'm going to say now may seem a little selfish, but I'm extremely concerned about the air quality in our close because I have lung cancer. Unfortunately, my next door neighbour has COPD and emphysema, and the lady 2 doors down from us has got breathing problems so bad that she has to walk around with an oxygen tank on 24 hours a day when she's walking a dog in the close. So air quality is really important to myself and the other people in the close. Any further vehicles due to Mr. Murphy's development here can only exacerbate this problem. Nobody in the right mind could say it was going to improve anything. As Derek said, there's no way the development can proceed without severe damage to the trees. The overhead photograph shows exactly what that is. That bears no resemblance whatsoever, believe me. These trees form a natural barrier and protect the close from the motorway to a certain extent, both with regards to noise and pollution. The noise in the motorway is very obtrusive, and I believe the council have got a slight dispute with Mr. Murphy over the sound levels of his recordings. I don't wish to make assumptions, but I would be very surprised if Mr. Murphy's sound levels weren't taken during the recent 50 miles per hour limit that was imposed on the motorway, which made a significant difference to the noise levels. The trees also form a very attractive, quite verdant look to that end of the close, which is a great amenity to us. Mr. Murphy goes to great lengths to say that it won't affect the visual impact on the close. It certainly will for myself and our neighbours in our back gardens, I can assure you. It really, once again, obviously that's no interest to Mr. Murphy.
I've got to say the red light's been on for about 2 minutes now. Good
I
use
appreciate
of
that.
oil.
Well, I'll just close by saying, you know, if the views of the residents count for anything, you simply can't approve this. Thank you.
I'll ask our planning officer to respond to the comments, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just to come back on some of the points that were raised, hopefully I'm covering everything. One of the first points was the site history. This was set out in the the report. There were 3 previous planning applications and they were refused for various reasons. This is also set out in the background section of the report. This current application has considered all of those issues previously raised, and in the local planning authority's opinion has addressed those concerns. As such, we are recommending approval. The proposed works do not require any tree works. I've had conversations with the agent and they have confirmed that there would be no works required. Our ecologist did raise some concern in terms of birds using those trees and protected species. So we've had those conversations to ensure that no works would happen to those trees to the east. Further, the trees to the north are protected by a TPO, so works could not be done to those without the relevant consents. In terms of parking issues, a parking survey was submitted, which was reviewed by the local highways authority. The plans have also been amended to show a different variation of parking provisions on site. The local highways authority have agreed and accepted those provisions. I know one of the speakers mentioned about the character of the applicant. As Mr. Osmond has already mentioned within the planning guidelines, this is not a material planning consideration. I think the last issue raised was air quality. The agent has also submitted a report covering this matter. This was reviewed by the Council's Environmental Health Officer, and they have not raised any objection to the information in that report. Hopefully that's all matters covered, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll ask Louise Cox as the agent.
Thank you, Chair. As with the previous proposal, I think it's important to emphasise that this site does lie within the urban area where the development of new dwellings is acceptable in principle. Of course, that doesn't mean that any proposal is acceptable, and members will note the previous refusals for new dwellings on this site in the past. But each of these refusals has allowed a further understanding of what would be considered acceptable on this site. These refusals have also allowed an understanding of what further justifications are required in order to address particular concerns. The application before you this evening has taken account of each and every one of those previous concerns. With regards to design, my client has worked tirelessly with your planning officer to reach an agreed design and layout for the new dwelling. With regard to trees, my client has provided a full tree survey and arboricultural assessment to demonstrate that no harm would come to the trees on the eastern boundary of the site. With regards to parking, my client understands the concerns but has provided sufficient parking. A parking survey has also been provided to your planning officer, and this survey has been carried out using the Lambeth technology. That's a standard which is a standard expected by the Planning Inspectorate. In relation to noise, a noise survey has been carried out that shows that with acoustic glazing and mechanical ventilation, the noise environment for the new occupiers would be acceptable. And as your planning officer said, the Environmental Health Officer has no objection on those grounds. And in relation to air quality, again, a full air quality survey to the required standards has now been provided, which demonstrates no unacceptable air quality issues. My client has also agreed to a landscaping condition to secure the additional landscaping on the site. All in all, your planning officer has pushed us hard for improvements to the scheme and for the extra reports and surveys that are required to justify her recommendation for approval. And so I hope that members can support their professional officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Right, first of all then we'll go to questions, and I'll just throw a couple in. One, on the parking issue. Now, as the County Councillors, the Highway Authority, have not objected, that I think prevents others for refusing on those grounds.
We wouldn't recommend it. The local highways authority have agreed with the parking provisions. We as the local planning authority have also agreed that there is sufficient parking on site. I would strongly advise members comply with those agreements that we've already had.
And as we've heard, if I think right, the air quality in Steel Close and Passwood Avenue are the two worst areas in Borough with the lowest air quality.
Hallelujah.
I'm not sure on which is worse, but it is. The site does fall within an air quality management area.
Yeah. Right. Members, questions, please.
James.
Yeah, the trees obviously are a big cause of concern for all of us local residents, and general impact and how we perceive our green and leafy area of Chandler's Ford. It says the impact upon trees, ecology and surface water drainage matters are also acceptable subject to conditions. Were the conditions the survey that's been referred to, that's been carried out? I think I'm aware that we have actually turned down some applications where we felt that there could be an adverse impact on trees, even if they weren't listed trees. Would that be correct?
Yeah, sorry, I'm just finding the conditions. So in terms of ecology, condition 17 sets out that the ecological enhancement should be complied with as set out within the submitted report. In terms of trees, the Council's arboriculturalist hasn't raised any objection, and as previously mentioned, the ecologist noted that there could be protected species using the trees. However, the agent has confirmed that the proposed works would not require any works being done to the trees. Yeah, there is a tree condition on there as well. And
for clarification,
yeah.
What is the tree condition specifically?
Would you like me to read the tree condition? Yeah, so the development must accord with the arboricultural report referenced March 2023, JFA 0104. No excavation, demolition or development related works shall commence until the tree protection measures have been installed as per the tree protection plan contained within the report. Once installed, no access by vehicles or placement of goods, chemicals, fuels or soils or other materials shall take place within the protected area. Tree protection measures shall be retained in their approved form for the duration of the work and may only be modified subject to written agreement from the local planning authority. And the reason is to ensure, to retain and protect the existing trees which form an important part of the amenity to the locality. Also, I would add that on the location plan there is a boundary fence that does separate the trees from the residential amenity area of the proposed dwelling.
Any more questions? In which case, do I have a proposer? You're proposing that we permit. Does that find a seconder, please? Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Baker. George? Debate then, members. Dave?
Thank you. I find myself at odds with the officers. Eastleigh has adopted a local plan. That local plan has been adopted in full council and it is now our policy. The local plan has several documents which support it, one of which is Quality Places. Quality Places was adopted by resolution as our supporting document for the local plan in November 2011. It is our policy document, and it's our policy document that the officers are duty bound to support and to make sure it's done properly, and for us to support in our votes. So I started looking through Quality Places, and if you look on page 38, there's an interesting comment there. It talks about car parking and where it's supposed to be. Car parking should be within 20 metres of the property. All car parking. The garage, the nearest garage in the block, is 106 metres away. So that's not 20 metres or anywhere near it. It also says the drive width for a property that is also a shared pedestrian frontage should be 3.2 metres. Now this one is a bit of a moot point because it's a shared driveway and it doesn't get to 3.2 metres for that property until you're nearly at the front door. I'm not sure that that's a breach, but it's not within the spirit of what we're trying to do. We also go on, if you look at page 42, it suggests that parking should not cause an adverse impact to windows at ground level, particularly at night. And it goes on to give examples. If you've got your car parking in front of the window and you don't have any barrier, you need to stop the car 3 metres before the window. But if you have a wall, you can go to 2 metres to the house. Well, obviously, if we have that, you couldn't get a car on the drive. That would be ludicrous. So I think it fails on those points. But then if you look at the garage itself as being, because we're subdividing the properties, so all aspects of this subdivision must satisfy the current regulations and current policies. And a garage is required a certain width. If you go onto the internet, you'll find, you can look it up for yourselves, a car for the purpose of going in a garage is deemed to be, the average one is 1.8 metres. And they say you need 800 millimetres of space for the driver's door to open. Well, that puts that at 2.6 metres. That's a little bit of a problem for the garage because they're only 2.5 metres wide. But it gets worse because they also say, because people don't want to drag their cars along the garage wall, you need a clearance on the passenger side, and the clearance required is 300 millimetres, which brings it up to 2.9 metres. Well, these garages are built in the 1970s when the cars were a lot narrower, they didn't have side impact protection, and nobody ever thought we would need a garage that wide, but we do. But if we're going to use that garage in a modern planning application, it must fit the modern criteria, and it simply doesn't. It's too far away and it's too narrow. And I also likewise don't see anything about cycle storage or provision on either side, and that should have been in there. That is a design and access statement for cycling is supposed to be there. It's part of, on page 43 of Quality Places. It's not there. On parking alone, this is just, it fails. It doesn't meet Quality Places. And if it doesn't meet Quality Places, we can't approve it because we wouldn't be acting in good faith. We would be leaving council policy and voting for a variation that we don't have any authority to do. I mean, when we accept all these policies, we represent the residents. They give us their vote and they give us the chance to represent them. And so in representing them, we don't, as it was made clear to me when I became a councillor for Lib Dems, you know, you're not going to be there to rule, you're there to serve. If you want to rule, there's a door. Please use it straight away. So in serving them, we need to make sure that we are in sympathy with Quality Places. And I think that the residents know better than us that the parking in that road is crazy. Now, if we have another house going in there, there's likelihood at some point of having at least 2 cars, and if one of them happens to be a tradesman, he'll have a van. And the house immediately next door, who've got a lovely hedged front, I think they probably will be lucky to get their car parked in front of their car, in front of their house. I don't see it happening. There's going to be enough problems there already. Adding to it shouldn't be what we do. Quality Places is all about providing areas of housing that promotes good living, good neighbourly relations. Here, this application, at some point in the next 90 years, because that's how long the house will be there, those neighbours are going to be at war over parking and access. How we could ever think that that is a good idea. Okay, I get that someone runs off with a nice big chunk of money because he's developed a house from a bit of back garden development, but he hasn't added to the quality of Chandler's Ford. This is, I would think it's misplaced. I do actually think it's possible to get a house on that site and satisfy everything in Quality Places. And there is a design I think could do it. This isn't it. This one just seeks to cash in as much as you can get for as little outcome as you can get, and it doesn't try to attend to address the important issues to that community, which is who we are representing here today. So, for those reasons, It doesn't satisfy quality places, and it's an absolute. It's because some people will try and downgrade this quality places, but you can't. It's adopted as policy, and our leader of the council, and I'll read it to you. At the bottom of page 1 of the preface, it says, this document clearly outlines the criteria by which all development proposals will be assessed, from one house to the largest industrial estate or commercial project. Now that's pretty emphatic. It's everything. It's not a guidance. If you go to the introduction, it says this document is designed to provide guidance to the council's expectation on design of new development, both residential and non-residential. It is the council's interpretation of the relevant policies of the council's local plan. It goes on to say it will be used as material consideration by the council's development control unit. And then it goes on to say it can also be used by members when considering the design aspects of planning applications. Well, if we do that, we find that this application doesn't meet the standard. It's not open to debate. It doesn't. You can't do all the parking on the properties and within 20 metres, and you can't use a garage that you can't park a car in. I mean, you might be able to squeeze a car in through the door, but have you parked the car when you drive it into a box that you can't get out of? You can't open the doors in a car. If you go down there, you'll see lots of cars parked outside or in front of their garage doors, but they know they can't get in and get out of their car. So it's not a parking space anymore. So for that reason, I'm a bit surprised that we have a permit recommended, because it doesn't fit and it doesn't stand up to quality places measurement. Thank you.
Thank you. Do our planners wish to respond to that?
Yes, please, if that's possible, Chair. Thank you. So yes, the Quality Places SPD is something that we do consider. It is a material planning consideration. However, it's supplementary planning document. It's guidance. It is not our policy. It is just guidance. As set out within paragraph 69 of the committee report, the garage is not forming part of this consideration. So that's not material to what we're considering. All we are considering is the on-site parking provisions. Condition 13 says that prior to occupation, the development of bin and cycle storage will be provided. Whilst it's not shown on the plans, it is accepted that there is sufficient space on site for this to be provided, so this would not be an unreasonable condition. And in terms of the Quality Places SPD, in reference to the 3 metre distance, that actually relates to ground floor flats, and as this is both of the existing house is a dwelling, and the proposal would also be for a new dwelling, so that wouldn't apply because neither are flats.
Thank you. Is there any more debate, members?
Irregular, I know. Quality Places is not a guidance note. It absolutely is not. You just heard it for yourself. It is the policy by which all applications will be judged. That's what it says in the front, and it's signed underneath by the leader of the Borough Council. And it hasn't been rescinded at Open Council. It is our policy, and the policy is something that you are duty-bound to uphold without evasion or equivocation. There's no fear or favour here. It doesn't meet the standard. If it does, I would accept it. And the garage most certainly does appear in the notes. It actually says in there that the house, the existing house, it makes mention of the garage. Well, the planning, the parking is now, will become a building site. So we're moving the parking from the dwelling, it's being positioned somewhere else. So it does come into it. We have to have two parking spaces for that house. You are changing the plot, subdividing it, and you're losing the car park. Therefore, it is relevant. And the car garage was mentioned as part of the parking arrangements. So I'm afraid it does. But unfortunately, as I said, as I did email in on the 15th of May, querying the width of the garage, had that been pursued, we wouldn't be having this debate now.
I need to respond in terms of the Quality Places SPD. If you look in the prefix, the comments from Councillor House, it says under purpose of the document, this document provides detailed guidance in support of Local Plan Policy 59BE, and that was the previous reference to the old local plan. The equivalent to that now is DM1. You need, as in the guidelines I went through earlier, you need to make a decision in accordance with the local plan. The Quality Places SPD supplementary planning document is not the plan. It is supplementary to the plan, in the same way that other guidance documents are. So yes, it sets out various standards which we would expect to see, but is ultimately guidance, and it can never meet the requirements of every single site, which all its individual aspects. So I have to reiterate that. If members are minded to not support the application, you can, because parking is an issue. You could look to refuse the application on insufficient parking, because we have acknowledged it doesn't meet our normal residential parking standards SPD. However, should the application be appealed without a strong objection from the local highways authority, it could be harder to argue. But I'll leave that for yourselves to debate and decide on whether that's a possible course of action you wish to take.
Is there any further debate? In that case, I'll ask the seconder, the proposer, to wind up, please.
You proposed already. I'm asking you to wind up as a proposer.
Sorry.
Do you wish to respond to the debate at all?
No.
All right then. Sums that up.
All those in favour, please show.
Those against?
Thank you. Motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. We now come to planning appeals. Can I ask that we note the appeals, please? All those in favour, please show. Thank you.
Thank you and good evening. So at 8:47, whatever it is, I declare the meeting closed. Thank you very much. Thank you.